We've got a still life today. It's a complicated draw, but I want you to have a go. What I've done is I've started over this side, and I want you to really look at the negative shapes that you're seeing as you're coming along. So I've started with this edge of the fabric, and then I'm looking at the distance. It's the placing of the object, so looking at the distance of that fabric before I place the cup in. And I started with the cup and got that shape in. So I've left all my lines in here so you can see them. So concentrate on getting a nice ellipse and then bringing it down, and a nice ellipse at the bottom, a nice handle. Then bring this edge of the fabric in. Then you're going to place a lemon, and if you look at the relationship of the lemon to the mug, that will help. You want to make it a bit bigger so it feels like it's coming forward. Then you're going to place in the teapot. So I have popped a central line in. It's slightly over this side, so it just gives you a central line to help you, just so you can see the shapes either side and check that they're looking right. Get the main shape in first, then pop the spout and the handle on, and then concentrate on the lid. Get that in. Get in a few more fold lines. They don't have to be wholly accurate. The whole sort of still life doesn't have to be wholly accurate. As long as it looks symmetrical, we're fine with it. I want you to concentrate on placement and seeing if you can get that right. Okay, colours wise, I've got Gambo's yellow and cerulean blue to make a green. If you haven't got cerulean blue, you could use intense blue. That would give you a slightly brighter green, but that would work as well. I've got some watery rose, I've got cobalt blue and burnt sienna to make a grey, and then a purple made with rose and cobalt blue. Again, I want that to be quite watery. Okay, so I'm going to concentrate first of all on getting this background section in here. And this foreground section just there. So I've got a little bit of water. I'm just going to touch into the rose. And just dab that through. And brush a little bit of a rinse. Then I'm just going to dab into the grey. So I want a nice loose background just in there. Concentrate on getting a nice fold in the fabric. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so I've dried that off. And then I'm going to come back in just to create this dark bit of the table behind here. So a little bit of water. I'm going to bring in some grey. Just get that nice edge. Come around this side. And then just at the bottom here, I'm just going to pop a little bit of the grey along to create that shadow line. Okay, so I'm going to start to come on to the cup. Concentrate on this main area first. If it's a bit bright, just take a bit off. So where you've got the shiny areas, you've got to try and leave it dry. So where I'm capturing the light, that's where I'm going to try to leave it dry. The trick is to not feel that you've got to get every single bit in one go. So I'm just going to concentrate on the rose to start with. If I feel like I've got time and it's still damp, I'll come back in. Try to use the tip of your brush to get a nice edge. Where it's lighter in places, you can lift some out with a damp brush. I'm going to come into this bit here as well. Don't worry about your pencil lines, you can always just rub those out after. I quite like the pencil lines in there. And then I'm going to come to the inside of the handle. Just there. Right, I'm going to pick up a number 6 now. So that was around number 10. I'm picking up a number 6. And I'm going to come in with some of the grey. Just whilst it's still damp. So look how the paint is being applied, so try and keep to the surface. So I'm coming down in straight lines. And this is softer shadow, we can put harder shadow on later. So clean, damp brush. It's your last chance to lift out any lighter areas. So if you want to lift, just keep dabbing on kitchen towel. You can just lift out a little bit of a lighter area. Okay, so that's a good start for the mug. We'll dry that off. Okay, so that's nice and dry now. I'm going to come back in to the mug just to create some sharper shadows. So I'm going to do a little bit at the end. This is just the grey. Just coming around this edge. I want to see the tip of my brush so that I can get a really nice line. And then this side. I'm just rinsing my brush, got some clean water. Just going to soften in those edges with a damp brush. And then back round to this angle. Got to get this edge nice. Then I'll go a a sharp shadow coming down here, and a little bit of a shadow from the fabric here. Again, rinsing my brush, I'm just going to touch in. Just to that shadow there. And a little bit into this shadow here. I don't mind this staying a bit sharper there. Okay, I'm going to come on to the lemon now. So we have a point of shadow, shadow highlight here. So I'm going to leave, there's a little bit here as well. So I've drawn those in so you can see that I'm going to leave those wet and dry, sorry. Can't get my words out today. So everywhere else wet, those two dry. So this is Gamboge yellow. You could use lemon yellow as well if you wanted. Get a nice covering on there. Swapping down to my round number 6, and I'm just going to pick up some of the purple. Make sure you give it a little bit of a stir. So purple's your complementary colour, so it's going to make a good shadow colour. You want it to run a little bit. A little bit of shadow along here. Teapot. And then I'm going to just take a dab of rose in. I don't want it to look orange, but there's a hint of warmth in a couple of places. Damp brush, not wet, just lift out a little bit of the yellow. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so that's all dried off now. I'm just going to come in with a little bit more of the purple just to create that sharper shadow. So this is quite watery. It's really important you get a good shadow at the bottom because that grounds everything. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so that's nice and dry. So the first thing I want to do is concentrate on getting the reflection in Teapot. So I'm going to pop in a little bit of the lemon to start with. So I just want you to look at the picture and get these shapes in. I'm going to pop a bit of of shadow in. So I'm just concentrating on getting the reflection. Sure that shadow doesn't travel too far. Now a touch of rose in there. And then I'm just going to come into the teapot spout, and what I'm doing is I'm using the purple to start with. So this is quite watery because there's a lot of light reflected. I'm coming on to dry, and I want you to in effect capture two tones. So we're going to use the purple as one tone to make it simple, and then the grey as a tone after. So we're capturing the light and the mid-tone. So when the light is going to be white, the mid-tone can go where the dark tone's going to go as well, and then you pop the dark over after. So you want white and the base for everything else. Just be careful not to touch into your yellow, you can dry them in between. You don't have to capture every single bit of light. As long as you've got a few, it will work. I'm going to do the same on the spout now. So this is the mid-tone. And then your bits of bright white. What I'm going to do is pick up a bit of the green, we've not used that yet, and I'm just going to drop a little bit of that into this handle. Just where it's reflecting. Because this is cerulean blue and it's going into transparent, it still shows. A tiny bit there as well. And we're just going to dry that off. Okay, so that's dry now. I'm just coming back into the green. I just need a little bit of green to show in here. And then there's a fair amount of green within here. So use whichever brush you're comfortable with. I'm using a round number 6. Just looking where the green is and placing that in. Give my brush a little bit of a rinse, just in a few places, just touching. Okay, so the last bit you missed was I just added a tiny bit of grey just along this bottom edge whilst it was still wet. So I've dried that off now. What I'm going to do is come in with a little bit of rose. There's something red reflecting in here. And there's a tiny bit reflecting here as well. So just pop a bit in there. Just coming down to my round number 6, and then I'm just going to bring in some of the grey just into that. Whilst it's still wet. And then the same this side. Bring in a little bit, just so it's not quite as rose. I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so that's dried now. I've just got a few little dabs, so I'm just going to reflect some colour. So this is a little bit of the rose. It's really up to your interpretation. And then I've got a little bit of the green, so definitely underneath there, maybe a little bit on here. It helps make it look metallic, having these little bits reflected in the colour. And then I want you to make sure you've got plenty of the grey. Just mixing up a little bit more. And so that bit's wet up there, but I can come onto the spout and start to create those darker lines now. So this is straight onto dry. I'm using them round number 6, and I'm going to start to pop the dark grey on. It's the same grey we've used before. You're just popping in your darker tones now. Try to get a nice edge. haven't got a great edge on this top bit, so let me come back to it. It's always better, you always get a nicer edge if you can see the tip. Of your brush. Right, I've got a damp brush, and what I'm going to do now is, so it's slightly wet, is I'm just going to just arch and just come through in a few places. So that just gives a cylindrical feel. Just helps gel it all together whilst it's still damp. Just make sure you don't do it in a pattern, you want it to be random. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. That one's dry. I'm going to come on to main pot. Right, so I've picked up around number 10 to start with, just because I want to get some of the base of this colour in quite quickly. The rest of the colour. So don't be afraid to come over what you've done. You need these different colours appearing through. To reflect. It also gives a feeling of surface. So I'm just dampening in places. And go down to my round number 6. Come along this bottom edge again. Come along this edge. Just get a nice edge there as well. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, I'm going to come into the purple, just so that I do the similar to what I did on the spout, which is to get those mid-tones in. So just concentrate on where there might be a little bit of light, where those mid-tones are. Just going to take a tiny bit of purple into this dry area here as well, just so I've got that similar purple reflecting. The body of the pot's quite a lot darker, but it still feels like it needs that bit of mid-tone. Use that to create that bit of shadow there. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so I've got plenty of my grey now, and then I'm just going to come in and just start to create the dark bits that I can see. And this is straight on to dry. So just concentrate on getting those darks in and the shapes that you can see. Everybody's interpretation will be different. That's absolutely fine. Remember to try to leave those little bits of light. You can come back and put more in later. So don't feel we have to do the whole thing in one go. It's having the confidence to actually paint what you see and not worry too much about how it's going to turn out. Which I know you'll be saying, it's easy for you to say that. So I'm not seeing this as a pot at all, as a teapot. I'm seeing it as colours and shapes, and I'm just popping those in. Then I've got a damp brush. It's not too wet, and I'm following that line there. So I'm just gonna bring through a tiny bit of water in places. So you follow at all times, you're following that arch, so it's giving it that cylindrical feel. And just pulling a damp brush through, it just gives the sense of a surface. A bit of an arch happening there, a little bit here, curving round. Just sense of a surface, that's all I want, just that sense. Again, just here, a bit of a damp. Don't need to do too much on the lid, I think it's holding together quite well. Have I missed anywhere? A bit more dark there. I'm just going to give a tiny bit of dark just down this edge here. Not necessary, I can't necessarily see that, but and a little bit just here. I'm doing that because I know that I'm going to put the green behind, so I need something to hold it together. And then if I just dab a bit of water in here, so that's base is not too. And just relook at the spout just for those darks, because this mix is a little bit darker, so I'm just going to pop in a couple of darks just so that still connects. Okay, I'm going to dry that off. Okay, so we've got this fabric to do now, so I'm getting as close as I can to the teapots, making sure I've got plenty of water on, coming around the lemon. Make sure you've got a lot of that green mixed up. Make sure your brush is clean to start with. So the first thing I'm going to do is reflect a bit of the lemon colour just there. And give this colour a really good mix. I've missed a bit of water down there. Right, so I want the fabric to be really light in this background. And then get darker as it comes towards the shadow area. So this is just about getting the base on. You want to try and be as neat as possible as you come around. And remember, you need to leave the white rim of the cup if you can. It's not the end of the world if you go over any of this. Slightly come onto my lemon there, I didn't want to do that. We can come in with a little bit of white ink at the end, or white pen if you make a mistake. Get the base on, don't worry about inside the handles, they're like a separate area. You've got to do this base all in one go, so concentrate on the bits you've got to do. You can come back to those other bits. You get that natural break point. where possible, try to flow how you would flow with the fabric. So paint in the direction of the flow of the fabric. Obviously not so easy when you're coming around a teapot. In the centre bit here. Swap down to number 6. Okay, shadow wise, I'm just going to bring on a little bit of the purple mix, so make sure it's not too strong. And then I just want you to start to pop in that soft shadow. If at this point it's drying, don't worry, you don't have to come on with a shadow. Okay, so I've dried that off, and then I'm coming in with some sharper shadow. So this is still a similar green, it's slightly greener, doesn't matter. It's up to you really how you want to interpret that colour. And I want you to pop in some sharper shadows, but I want you to soften in one side, so that's just wetting one side. And I want you to really focus on the bottom shadows, so I don't want you to worry too much about what's happening at the top. So I'm trying to ground this now, stop it being floaty. And the trick to that is to make sure that you've got really good shadows in. Come up this bit, that fold there. Around here. Just going to wet my brush, and then I want to just wet one side. Doesn't matter which side. Just so it's got a softness in places. You don't want it to be fully hard. A little bit just here. And then just look in the background. I don't want too much shadow in here, but there needs to be a little bit to hold it together. So I'm just going to pop those in, and a little bit just there. Again, clean wet brush, just softening one side. Round number 6, I'm just going to come into my grey, and I want you to just dot in where it's nice and dark. So here, there's a lovely bit of dark in there, lovely bit of dark in here. So just in places whilst it's still damp, I just want you to dot a little bit. If you concentrate around the bottom of things, that will really help accentuate it. That's good. I'm just going to dry that off. Okay, so that's dried off now. Right, I've got a little bit, so this is a grey, a little bit of a shadow here that I need to pop in. I'm just going to follow this line here. So I don't want this to be too strong, but it's just creating that base, and again it's that same grounding effect. I'm just going to pop a bit here as well. And then you can do any last sort of little tweaks. I just want to get a bit more of a darker edge here. I'm going to take a little bit more the darker edge into the mug. And then just soften that in. I think I'm pretty much there. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you next week.